Hi guys and welcome to the channel. Today I'll be talking about what you will need to get started in 10th edition as a new player. I'll be focusing on combat patrols as the introduction of the new game system looks like the quickest and most cost effective option to get models on the tabletop. We will look at the basics for what you'll need to play a game and additional equipment you might want to consider if budget allows. If you start in the game with a friend, it's always a good idea to split the cost of certain items and both build equipment as you get further into the game. For me, the two most important things to consider are budget and time. If you're on a very tight budget, you can always look to pick up a second-hand army from eBay, but you would need to find a complete combat patrol army for this strategy to work. I would also strongly consider the amount of time you'll be able to dedicate to building, painting and playing the game. The initial cost can be quite high if you buy exclusively from GW, and it surprises most people how much time and effort it takes to build and paint a full set of miniatures. The first and most important decision to make is which faction you are going to play. I personally found this very difficult as I was constantly watching battle reports online and ended up building 8 separate armies up to 500 points. Because I was switching between armies constantly, I never ended up mastering any one of them and didn't find the army I really enjoyed playing. If I was starting again now, I would just pick the faction I most like the look of and learn to play them to a good standard. Every army has its strengths and weaknesses, and over the course of an edition, every army will vary how competitive it is. With GW stating combat patrols are going to be balanced, it feels like a good way to learn the basics of your army and add to it as 10th edition develops through codex releases and FAQs. As combat patrol armies vary in size, it's worth considering exactly what you are getting in each box. As an example, the Orcs Combat Patrol costs £95 from Games Workshop for 25 miniatures and used to come in at around 500 points. The Custodes Combat Patrol, costing the same, contains only 18 miniatures and was closer to 600 points. Obviously we don't know the new points for 10th edition yet, but you can see the clear power difference between the sets. Something to also consider is the additional costs and time of prepping the Orcs box set over the Custodes. 25 miniatures takes a lot of effort to paint, and the paint scheme for the Orcs requires more colours when starting out. You can of course just build the box set and paint it later on. It's a good option if your budget is tight, and it also makes it a lot easier to sell them if you decide they are not the faction for you. You also don't have to purchase everything or anything directly from Games Workshop, and you can get significant savings across the board by using companies such as Wayland Games and Element Games, paying just £76 for the same boxes. Once you've picked your army and ordered your combat patrol, you'll need certain equipment to build and paint them. Cutters for cutting your models from the sprue, a craft knife with a sharp blade for removing mould lines, and plastic glue are a must. GW do supply their own brand of each of these, but you can also find them just as easily on Amazon and usually a lot cheaper. In my opinion, it's worth spending a little more on a good set of sprue cutters, and if buying for children, I'd suggest GW's mould line tool instead of the craft knife. If you intend to paint your miniatures, as it is half the fun, you'll need a good quality primer, paintbrushes and paints for your colour scheme. If you don't own an airbrush, spray can primers are easy to use and just as effective, and most paint brands sell these, such as Citadel and Army Painter. I would stick with synthetic brushes to start out and make sure you watch plenty of guides on using and looking after your brushes when you get started. When buying your paints, decide if you want to go for standard paints or contrast or speed paints. I personally think it's a good idea to have a mix of both, and there are lots to choose from, and you can find good painting guides for each of these either on GW's website and app or on the many excellent channels on YouTube. If you start in the game with a friend, you can split the cost of a lot of these items between you and build and paint together. It will also help you push through the army and get them completed ready for the tabletop. Last thing you'll definitely need is dice, and usually lots of them. I started with 30 and found this sufficient for smaller games. To give you a rough idea of the initial cost of a starter set, I'd expect to be spending around £160 to £170. Again, savings can be made if you split these costs with a friend. If you have the budget, a few extra things you might want to consider are base and materials. These can be bought from most wargaming companies and do finish an army nicely. They also look great on the tabletop. You might also consider a game mat. I personally use Deep Cut Games mouse style mats, 44 by 30 inch size. They range at around £30 and not only look really good, but perfectly outline your play area when setting up from the mission books. Terrain is also something you'll need when you start playing. You can use household items to start with, and there are plenty of companies who make cost-effective, easy-to-build sets such as TT. I personally prefer the push-fit wood sets as you can build them quickly and they don't require painting. When setting up your game, table costs can easily get out of hand, so if you're just starting out, I wouldn't spend a huge amount of money on these. 3D printing terrain is also another cost-effective option if you or your friends have access to a printer. And finally, if you can get your hands on the Leviathan box set, it does come with 2 combat patrol armies inside. It will give you the option to try 2 separate armies, split the set with someone you play against, or even sell the half you don't want on eBay. GW's recent launches have been plagued by scalpers, so if you do miss out and you can't get the pre-order, I would wait until the official launch, and I'm sure plenty of half sets will be available. If you're interested in Space Marines or Tyranids as your starter army, I'd avoid the current combat patrols and try to get the Leviathan release models. I also imagine these combat patrols will be released as standalone boxes soon. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like and comment below on your preferred starter army. Until next time, see you later.